Good afternoon. Hello and welcome everyone to the LA Conservation Corps' inaugural speaker series presented by Boeing. I am Wendy Butts, CEO of the LA Conservation Corps, and I'm here today with Senator Maria Elena Durazo and Mary Ellen Sprenkel, along with our esteemed Corps member alum, Michael Barahona. To start us off today, we have a quick video we're going to show you, and then I'm going to run into some information about today and some bios before our questions start. Thank you all for being here.
I was actually unemployed, really not even knowing exactly where I was gonna go.
Coming to the Corps was my first real job, and it basically prepared me mentally to get into the work field, to do more, to try to excel, to be great.
Working here at the Corps, I've learned so many skills.
Breaking concrete, mixing cement, driving a skip loader, bobcat.
Tough projects that we tackle there, from irrigation to building bridges of 20 to 80 foot long.
Having a schedule.
CPR, OSHA, forklift.
All the staff treat their Corps members like family. They try to help them on anything they can for Corps members to better their life and find a career.
All right, hopefully that gives you a good idea if you don't know who we are and what we do. A little snapshot there. So as we thought about all that the Corps has been through in the last 7 months and how proud we are of how our Corps members have responded to all the changes in their lives, we couldn't help but be inspired by their resilience. So that is the theme of these 3 virtual meetings over the next week or so. Resilience, unleashing the power of youth. We're looking forward to having conversations about the state of the world, not just from the perspective of a youth development organization, but specifically from the perspective of a conservation corps. So just a few housekeeping items. We do invite you to type in questions. Please type those directly into the Q&A box as we go along, and we will get to as many of those as we can as time allows at the end. Today we want to discuss how young adults are faring in the recession that has been brought on by the pandemic, and what organizations like the LA Conservation Corps and policy leaders should be thinking about when they are considering economic stimulus programs at both the state and the national level. We know that young adults can have an important role to play, but that they need to be considered as a unique population and be part of the conversation. So let me introduce our panelists. First, we are pleased today to have with us State Senator Maria Elena Durazo from the 24th Senate District of California. As the child of migrant workers, Senator Durazo grew up traveling with her family, following the crops throughout California and Oregon, and experiencing the exploitative conditions and hardships that migrant laborers suffer. While attending St. Mary's College in Moraga, California, she became involved in the Chicano movement at the urging of her older brother. Then she entered the labor movement as an organizer for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. While working as a union organizer, she pursued an education in law at the People's College of Law and earned her degree in 1985. In 2004, she became the executive vice president of Unite Here International, the organization made up when Unite and Here unions merged. In 2008, she served as the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee and as national co-chair of the Barack Obama presidential campaign. From 2006 to 2014, she was the first woman secretary treasurer of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, the second largest labor council in the country, and served on the National AFL-CIO Executive Council. And in 2018, she was elected to the California State Senate, and earlier this year, along with many other things, introduced SB 1296, the Nature and Parks Career Pathway and Community Resiliency Act, to establish independent grant programs to fund climate mitigation, adaptation, or resilience, natural disaster, and other climate emergency projects, and specifically called out Corps to implement them. Thank you for being here, Senator, and for your commitment to organizations like the LA Conservation Corps and our Corps members. Next, we have Mary Ellen Sprenkel, President and CEO of the Corps Network, the national network of conservation corps with 100+ members that support over 22,000 Corps members across the country every year. Mary Ellen has been a longtime champion for youth and national service. She joined the Corps Network in March 2008 after spending more than 10 years on Capitol Hill. She has served as CEO of the Corps Network since 2012. And during her tenure, Service and Conservation Corps have gained recognition among lawmakers and policymakers throughout the federal government. Legislation that would expand and bolster youth programs, including Service and Conservation Corps, has been routinely introduced in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. In recent years, Mary Ellen has served as a member of the Federal Advisory Committee tasked with providing recommendations to federal land management agencies on how to implement a 21st century conservation service corps. And she's currently working to ensure corps benefit from the newly passed Great American Outdoors Act that is bringing $9.5 billion to public lands over the next 5 years. Finally, I'm very happy to introduce Michael Barahona, a former LA Conservation Corps member and now crew leader with the Mile High Youth Corps in Denver. Until earlier this year, and for about 2 years, Michael worked out of our East LA site and was an active member of its leadership council. He attended events like our Coca-Cola's Dear Future LA Speaker Series that we facilitated here last year, where he asked thoughtful questions and shared his own perspectives on ensuring a bright future for young adults like himself. I got to know Michael more and heard about his goals and path as he was finishing up his time with us and getting ready to move to a new place all on his own. He asked a few of us on the executive management team here if he could have informational interviews with us. I learned of his love of learning, passion for the outdoors, and goal of joining the Peace Corps, like I did 25 years ago. Michael is an adventurer and a champion for the underserved, and it's a pleasure to have him here today. Welcome, all three of you. So, Senator, I want to start first with you. What is top of mind for you right now as you think about young people in Los Angeles and their employment options as of today?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Great to meet other folks and see my tocaya, Mary Ellen. One of the things that concerns me the most is that our youth would see themselves as having these jobs of the future, that they should see themselves as being the ones to fulfill in this generation, their generation, opportunities not only to address climate change and all the related issues, but also to see themselves as the ones to take that on in a very specific way through careers and jobs. One of the specific things I'm doing right now, because I'm concerned about that, is Proposition 16. So I want to make sure, like a lot of other people, is that we have real diversity in higher education, in training, and public contracting. When I went to school 50 years ago, I worked really hard. I studied really hard. I thought that was the way to do it. But I quickly found out that if you didn't have the information, if you weren't recruited in such a way and had the programs in place, then you wouldn't have the same shot as other people. And so I was very glad and very grateful that there were affirmative action programs that sought me out and gave me that opportunity, gave me the chance that I wouldn't have otherwise. There had to be programs that specifically addressed me. I was a migrant farm worker. Somebody had to reach out to me and tell me and help me along the way. Not because I couldn't study, not because I couldn't learn, not because I couldn't be good at whatever I wanted to be, but because there were just so many barriers. Lacking access to all sorts of things. So I'm really working hard on passing Prop 16 for the purposes of our future, diversity and giving everybody that opportunity. And that gives me the hope that we're going to create, sort of on this mission of helping others, helping myself and others together to create those workforce programs that young people need, and prioritize good jobs and make sure that that becomes a part of our way out of this economic crisis.
Thank you. So Green New Deals and green jobs are big, big terms. What do they mean to you, and what do you hope they mean to young people like Michael?
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because I hear the terms a lot. And to me, what matters is how does it translate into our communities? What does it mean in reality? What does it mean in practice to our communities? And our communities are facing not only the threat of climate change, they're in the middle of some really, really terrible situations of contamination that's already been brought upon our community. And so we have to think about now and we have to think about the future. And greening shouldn't be just about the future. What about the issues now? And so you may have heard of a particular case, the Exide recycling of batteries. That has caused more damage and danger to our communities than I think any other single issue in California. So how do we change from these bad things like contamination? How do we change that into something that will move our communities forward and include all communities? So when we say Green New Deal, it should be green for everyone. It shouldn't be green just for some communities. And when we say green jobs, I'm not talking about minimum wage jobs that are just clean up here and sweep there or do the dirty work. I'm talking about careers with a real, you prepare for them and they're your career and you're proud of it and it helps to sustain yourself, it helps to maintain a family if you decide to do that. And you see yourself as a really important component to greening our whole country and our whole world. So I'm hoping again that young people see themselves. We have to create the ways in which they see themselves as the ones to make this come about. Green New Deal is not going to happen without young people. Young people have to be in the middle of it, and they have to see that it makes a difference in their lives, not just, you know, very beautiful new green new world, but it has to mean something for them, for their families, for their futures, and again, something that matters. And so as we've been focused in the legislature and with the governor on climate resiliency, preparing for current and also long-term, you know, when you think of water, wildfire, extreme heat, sea level rise, these are all opportunities. We should see them as opportunities to do the right thing around climate change, but also is one thing I noticed in a lot of our programs and funding is that the amount that went to when I am, you know, working with others. I'm teamed up with, obviously, with you all and with colleagues such as Senator Stern and Senator Allen. We want to bring these parts together, the workforce development and our climate goals.
So you've definitely touched on the next question, but I will ask it because I know you'll give us a thoughtful answer. What role would you like to see Conservation Corps play in the economic recovery, specifically here in California, and the fight for climate resilience? And for me, of special interest, how can we give more young people the jobs they might not even know they wanted?
Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, SB 1296 was one attempt to address this. And that bill would have required each state conservancy and the Wildlife Conservation Board to establish these grant programs that train and employ our young people and others who have found barriers to employment. And so by establishing these grant programs that set workforce development criteria, I think was a really important part of that. And we would have, between the state conservancies and the Wildlife Conservation Board, would have worked with state and local workforce partners, and together would have developed those career strategies in the natural resources field. You know, this meant, as we saw in the video, right, real hands-on experience, certification, placement services for our youth and others. We have some, the state has some workforce development models like the High Road Construction Career Program. So we have some models on which to move forward. This program would have prioritized partnerships, for example, that link local building construction trades to workforce boards and community colleges. So we're very excited about that. We're not giving up on it. We're gonna keep hammering away. And I also wanna say that these kinds of programs will give some specific focus and outreach, training women, training formerly incarcerated people and others that, you know, some people say at risk. It's not at risk. There are youth, there are young adults, there are generation, they are us, and we can't treat anyone like there's some separate sort of group out there. So to me, it's about linking policies on climate change with future good paying careers. That's
Great,
what it's
thank
all
you.
about.
And then on more of a personal note, where do you get your strength to keep speaking out for others and keep fighting for what you believe? What words of encouragement do you have for young people like Michael who are starting their careers and seeing such unprecedented challenges put in their way?
Well, first of all, it's not the first time that a generation tackles challenges and really difficult things. Every single generation has its set of challenges. And I expect with very hardworking youth, smart youth, creative youth, that they're gonna tackle these issues, whether it's the pandemic, climate change, you name it, they're rising to the occasion. You could see it all over the country, and that gives me hope. As a young person growing up in this country, even with all of the obstacles that were put in our way, you know, I wasn't supposed to be a state senator based on my growing up as a migrant farm worker in town after town after town and school after school. That wasn't supposed to be, but we get through it. And part of what helped me get through it was to see my hardworking parents who just had this work ethic, my hardworking sisters and brothers. I was number 7 in my family, and my older sisters and brothers, in order to help support the rest of us, had to drop out of high school. Not because they weren't interested, not because they weren't dedicated to it, but they helped support me so I would have the opportunity and feel my dreams. So there's so many, I got enormous courage for more and nominal human beings with a lot of courage, immigrants who get treated, you know, as if they're nothing and get, you know, accused of being criminals. They're extraordinary men and women who have helped to build this nation. That's what keeps me going. That's what's always kept me going. And seeing, second is seeing injustices against people like that. So just the last story I'll tell you is, while we've all been involved in helping our communities and families who are harder hit, you know, I went to a church to help, and there were a huge, long lines of women with their children, with their babies and strollers. And they were in line for several hours to get a package of diapers. Just think about that. In line for a package of diapers, that is wrong. There's too much wealth in this country to allow that to happen to our communities and our families. So it's the combination of seeing an injustice with a combination of really strong, courageous men and women that I've been blessed to have in my life. And I know all of these young adults like Michael have the same things in their lives.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
truly an
Thank you.
inspiration. So now we're going to turn to the national stage. Mary Ellen, what has the CORE network been advocating for in DC in terms of support for COREs as part of any economic
Sure.
stimulus?
So a little bit of history. The unemployment rate, as everyone knows, has skyrocketed at the onset of the pandemic, closing of businesses, loss of jobs. And we know that this is particularly true, or the hardest hit populations are young people between 18 and 25, young people from low income communities, and young people of color. And this is a group of young people, or people who historically have had an unemployment rate twice that of the national average. So we're talking about a group that needs our special attention to begin with, but given our current circumstances, we really need to focus to provide opportunity. We know that this, as Maria Elena, Senator Durazo mentioned, this isn't the first crisis that our country has faced. In the 1930s, we were actually in very similar conditions. We had very high unemployment, high poverty, and there were a number of environmental challenges facing the country at that time that may be a little different than what we're facing now, but they were equally serious. So we know that the president at that time took the problems and put them together to make the solution, which became the Civilian Conservation Corps, and trained millions of young men, provided them with education, lodging, food, and job training. And in return, they built bridges and roads and parks and dams and all kinds of things that we still see all across the country today. Also in 2008, we were in the Great Recession, where we had another economic downturn, and Congress passed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA, which invested billions of dollars into the country's infrastructure. And the CORE network at that time advocated for the inclusion of language that would give, that would encourage project sponsors to utilize service and conservation corps for the project work. And I think LACC saw tremendous growth during that particular period of time. We estimate that corps across the country, and there are about 130 of them across operating in every state, saw an increase of about $60 million. So corps were able to grow and improve the services that they offered to young people at that time. So here we find ourselves again in a similar situation. It's not surprising that members of Congress and even some within the administration are thinking about a 21st century civilian conservation corps in order to employ young people quickly, while at the same time dealing with important problems that the senator mentioned, like climate change. So there are a number of bills currently pending in Congress that would, through various channels, provide resources and opportunity for corps to grow. A couple of those include the CORES Act, and that is the Cultivating Opportunity and Response to Pandemic Through Service Act. That bill would increase AmeriCorps, which is a funding source utilized by a lot of corps, to grow from about 80,000 corps members a year to 250,000 corps members a year. And there's quite a bit of language throughout the act that would direct funding towards service and conservation corps in particular. And we know that public lands and climate change is a focus of the service in that bill. We also, the CORE network has worked with Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon to introduce a couple of bills called the 21st Century Conservation Corps Act. And that would provide various levels of investment. The focus is more jobs on our public lands, particularly the National Park Service, National Forest Service. And we are continually advocating that urban areas and state and local public lands be included in these big packages. But he has put down a marker that would provide several $billions for corps. We are also hearing that the House, I think, has already introduced a huge infrastructure package, which would invest billions of dollars again in roads and bridges. We again are out in front advocating for the inclusion of green infrastructure, but in funding that supports all communities, regardless of whether they have public lands or not. In addition to advocating for the inclusion of cores in these particular measures, we also have learned from our lessons from the past that we need to do some things differently this time around. The original CCC was almost entirely white and entirely male. As the senator alluded to, we need to give women opportunities through economic stimulus packages. We also need to make sure that we're thinking about diversity and equity to ensure that communities that have traditionally been left behind are the ones who benefit most from investments in this area. We have also learned from ARA that the investment in the project work was great, but it was not accompanied by an investment in the people. There was no workforce development attached to ARA. And as a result, I think a lot of the funding went to big companies and did not get down to the people who really need the most. And I think there's probably some regret about the long-term impact of that. I think people envisioned it being greater, building this next generation workforce, and it was really more of an infrastructure package. So as we talk to the campaigns and to Congress, we're talking about things including cores, focusing on women and underserved populations, green infrastructure, and not just on our federal public lands, but on public lands that are accessed by everyone. So that's kind of where the message that we've been carrying forward here in Washington.
Great, thank you. How are you steering the discussion away from creating new cores and toward the work of the cores that are already part of the core network?
I say every chance I get that there is an existing infrastructure network of core programs that are doing this, have been doing it for decades, and are doing it very well. Programs like LACC, we actually reference LACC frequently as an example of what a good core looks like and the multiple benefits that a core can bring. You don't have to stand up a whole new federal program like the original CCC, but through partnerships with nonprofits like LACC that are already doing this work, that's definitely the way to go. And to anyone that I talk to, that is one of my primary messages.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to kind of combine a couple thoughts. Where do you mentioned this, but where do you see the greatest opportunity for cores to have an impact on the economic recovery? And specifically, we have this amazing opportunity with the Great American Outdoors Act. How are you helping to make those connections so that those dollars that are going to the public lands agencies actually also benefit conservation cores?
Well, again, I have been at the Secretary of Interior's office, the acting director of the National Park Service, the chief of the Forest Service, and said over and over again, cores can do a lot of the work that will be funded by this major investment. And it's about $1.3 billion a year for the next 5 years to address backlog maintenance on federal lands. And then there's another almost $1 billion through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which will provide funding for public land. I am sure people are tired of hearing today. I was on a call with the Secretary of Interior today, and I said, well, you already know what I'm going to say. Include cores. Cores can do parts of larger projects, entire projects. And they not only get the work done, but they're developing the next generation workforce, environmental stewards, outdoor recreation, and improving communities. So the Great American Outdoors encourage anyone who is interested, particularly in the land and water conservation funds, to connect their city park agent, public works agencies to get to proposals together and put them in, because I do that's great. One piece that I think falls short of the project work, which is great, but wouldn't it be even better if Congress and the administration were investing in the development of the workforce at the same time?
Great, thank you so much. So now we want to hear from someone who is ensuring that the senators and Mary Ellen's work and ideas are realized. Michael, good to see you. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to the LA Conservation Corps.
Hey, thanks, Wendy, for inviting me once again. Hello, Senator. Hello. So yeah, around the summer of 2017, at the time in my life, I personally was didn't have a direction of what I wanted to do for career. I did do 2 years of community college in 2015. But at the time, especially the climate, especially in the world, there wasn't a lot of motivation and commitment. And how I really got connected to LA Corps was through a friend, actually. He is a former Corps member from the LA Corps as well. This was a neighborhood friend that I knew, etc. And he mentioned the program. He said, "Hey, well, with your time, the time you have, would you like to try this program out? It's based in LA, etc. It's a nonprofit." And I said, "Well, the first thing I thought to myself was, well, aren't nonprofits, securely private, and there's all the stigmas you hear about them." But then I did my research, and I gave a call, and as I remember, especially from the East LA site, to connect them with jobs, not only to the city, but build on skills and resources, and also the fact that they would help you get your high school equivalent. So I thought, well, that sounds really great. I never heard of a program like that. So I decided to give it a shot and submit an application, and maybe in a matter of months in 2018 I got an interview. And as I remember walking into the interview, it was pretty straightforward, and I thought, well, I'd never been in an interview where it's really like a program, not just a typical office. You walk in the office interview. Intriguing to me that I lived in Los Angeles all my life. I live in El, my hometown is El Sereno, a bit north of East LA, but to hear that, I never knew that LA Corps has been there longer than me probably, and to be baffled by that. So I eventually got the interview, and and then I started within the program in I believe July. And within those months, the training I received and the experience, what we were really doing, the purpose of the program. It was pretty inspiring, and it did open my eyes a bit, especially in terms of conservation. As we all know, Los Angeles itself I believe has a pretty unique environment, the biodiversity, etc. But what I didn't really know was, and I wasn't really conscious of, were my surroundings, of what the environment I was really living in, how it would affect me not only for my future, but, you know, for the future of others. So in terms of conservation, you know, that's what really opened my perspective more about conservation, you know. And me, myself, I've always been, you know, very into nature. I respect wildlife a lot. I practice that every day. And I thought, well, this is perfect. It coincides perfectly. And this, I don't know, you know, I don't know, it might be a calling, this might be an opportunity, but I'm going to give it a shot. Then, you know, I just, you know, spent the time there I first was a Corps member, started as a Corps member, you know, tree planting and all other kinds of projects, you know, within construction, you know, project in Compton Creek, you know, examples like that, and, you know, tree management as well. I have never planted a tree in my life until I joined LA Corps, I'll tell you that. But, you know, what I really appreciate, especially within, you know, the Corps, and especially LA Corps, is that sometimes simplicity is all you need to really make a difference. And this could apply to the environment, this could apply to your life. And that's what I really was learning at the time. You know, what's the reason about what I'm doing is it really going to change my life, or is it really going to impact others? And that's why I you know, 2 years later in, you know, I found that answer. And I said, you know, I told myself, you know, all those years, and I eventually became a driver, kind of the point where I personally was hands-on the project at the East LA site specifically. And, you know, I looked, and within those 2 years already, I looked back and I said, well, you know, gosh, that's been so fast, and I learned so much, you know. And, you know, I received certifications, you know, HAZWOP for 40 hour, forklift, CPR first aid, OSHA. And, you know, I will tell you, you know, the time I put into the organization, you know, 2 years in, it has, I don't like to see is that it's paid off and it's been worth it. I really like to see that it's been a really big learning opportunity for me, because I am still learning today. But the fact that, you know, LA Corps really gave me an opportunity to really change you know, fine tune the details of me personally, and to really achieve a goal in general. And also too, the fact, you know, to put it into perspective with the environment and the community. Once all that melded together, that was really, you know, that was a perfect picture. That was when I realized, you know what, this is how the world I live in should be and should work, with the commitment and dedication and the wisdom that I've received. And from there on, that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to put more time into, you know, what the world has, you know, community, even through my peers, you know, my close friends, my colleagues as well. And that's what I really am really grateful for why I really joined LACC, you know.
So Michael, how has moving to another city and another Corps changed how you view conservation?
So for those who don't know, I moved to Colorado in February. I live in Denver. The reason for that, you know, quick story. I personally, you know, as Wendy said, like I am a risk taker. I am adventurous. Some have called me crazy. Some have called me question, but that's okay. That comes with it. But the really reason why I wanted a really new perspective in general. And when the time I was finishing at LACC, you know, this 2 years, I really thought, well, you know, I think it's time, especially me as a 23-year-old, you know, young adult. And I said, well, you know, I think it's time to spread my wings. You know, I want to try something new. A friend that lived out here, a close friend, he found a place, and, you know, he said, hey, well, have you ever thought of moving out here, etc.? And I'm like, what? Moving to another state? You know, you're crazy, you know, crazy talk. But then I really thought about it. I said, you know what? This may be a perfect opportunity for me to really test my ability, test what I'm really worth, you know, especially, you know, living independently. And So yeah, and I settled in February, and on behalf of Bridget, I remember when Bridget McRae of Mile High Youth Corps, Wendy here, introduced me to her, and Wendy, I remember when Wendy asked me, well, what are your plans for over there, Colorado? And it was pretty, I didn't really think about that honestly, but and then in terms of like 2 years at LACC, that's when Wendy's like, well, there's corps everywhere, and there's one right by you that where you're going to be, and and it came to be where that Wendy's really good friends with Richie Rafe, of Mile High Youth Corps. Then we all, many emails later, we all got connected, and I said, you know what, if I've started a path already, especially in the career of conservation, might as well continue it. And I got connected over here to another youth corps, Mile High Youth Corps, based in Denver, and and it's scary as it sounds, it was a parallel universe. As soon as I moved there, it was like if I never left LACC. It was so welcoming, so heartwarming. The staff there are amazing, and that's when I said, you know what, I'm going, now I'm going to continue that journey, this time independently by myself, and see what I could, bring, especially, to the communities of Denver too, and the state of Colorado. So I applied there too, and I got the position as a crew leader. And so far it's been really great. It's really been amazing. And the biggest takeaway from all this is, being literally in a new environment, physically, emotionally and mentally. Denver's very diverse as well. And the community I gotten to know there and work around with and spend time, it's been great. And just the fact of taking different perspectives really does open your eyes even more, because it's the fact that, that you're all alone. It's in a new world. So you ask yourself, what can I really, what impact can I not only leave here, but what influences can I bring with me as well? And that's how I really play my part in the world, is the learning and achieving and receiving. And it coincided perfectly with being now as a crew leader, a step above corps member, more new responsibilities, new priorities, and and I told myself, this is going to be a true test for me personally, for my skills and dedication, and it has been really well, and I have received so much like positive feedback, not only from Mile High, but the youth I worked around with. And that's why when I say small world is, as they say, what you walk away from, it eventually follows you. And that sense of community has always followed me, and that's what made me realize that community will always be a part of me, no matter how I see it. And especially working at Mile High, it has been another chapter to the book, as they say. And I will tell you, living in a new state, living independently, this is probably the biggest challenge I faced, this, not knowing anyone out here, no family, but that's the risk that comes with it, that's what I tell people, especially at my age, the real reason why, what it's like living in a new state, new environment, is I don't want to give up an opportunity, not only working somewhere, like LA Corp, but also I don't want to give up an opportunity to learn new things. Learn what can I improve my skills on, and what are my strengths and weaknesses. And that's the true test, especially living independently, that really comes with it. And there's always going to be ups and downs, as senators were saying, especially for my generation. It hits close to home, to see that I'm not the only one that's been in a situation like this or similar. And you know, that's how it's been like. You know, I've been here for 8 months already, and it's been a really, really big journey, but it's still not over yet.
Well, you are just like the senator. You're an inspiration, Michael. And our goal here with every Corps member is that we set you off on your path to self-sufficiency, and you are there. You're doing it. So congratulations. I wanted to open it up. I know we have one question, but I wanted to see if the senator, Mary Ellen, or Michael wanted to ask each other questions. We have about 5 minutes before we need to wrap up. So are there any questions among the panelists for the other panelists?
Oh.
I'm wondering, Michael, do you think you are going to make Colorado your home, or will you eventually go back to LA, or maybe even someplace different? There are corps all over the country. You could go anywhere you want.
You know, Mary Ellen, that was the funny thing I told myself, because I honestly didn't realize there were so many corps. I think there's 3 corps in this state alone. And, you know, I didn't realize that until I moved out here that there's corps everywhere. And, you know, on behalf of, you know, staying here, you know, or going back home, you know, I mean, honestly, the resilience and commitment and the time I put in doing this whole, you know, path of my journey, besides the career, besides working, you know, in conservation and dedicating my time to that, you know, I would tell myself, you know, I said, let's continue the path, walk down the road a bit more, because there's always going to be opportunities, they say. But what matters to me is what kinds of opportunities are that you will come across. And that's the biggest thing about, especially living out here, you know, like I said, alone, independently. High risk, high reward, as I tell people. The time and effort you put in, especially, you know, taking care of yourself, first of all, and also, you know, focusing on your career and you know, and your future, you know, that comes into account. And you know, I could compare California and Colorado on many other levels, but I think the real answer I could give you is that I want to create my own world that I want to live in, that I've been looking for. And that's really connects to the reason why I left California to come here. You know, it's, as you know, to be just cheesy, it's literally a new restart, a new take on my life, because I believe at some point, especially in my age, you know, there's always time for change. And if you want to change and you really strive for it and you make it happen, it will be the best benefiting thing that, you know, not only humbles you, but really sees the opportunities you've taken and opens more opportunities. And that's the kind of path I want to pursue in case, you know, staying here. You know, there could be there could be possibly another life-changing thing that could happen that I don't know yet. And that's the mystery about, you know, being on your journey and path, and why, you know, I love Colorado, to be honest. And, you know, I've 8 months here already, but it feels like forever. So, you know, maybe someday I will return to California, but, you know, I like to continue my journey and see where it takes me.
Great, thank you. I know we have a couple questions for the senator. Erica, did you want to ask Simbo's question?
Sure. Senator Durazo, we have a question regarding the targeted local hire program that exists here in Los Angeles, in the city of LA. Do you see a path for something like that at the state level? A program that is pushing making opportunities for young people to get into civil service?
Well, that's what I'm hoping. That's exactly what I'm hoping and pushing for. There's no doubt we can do it. I think what's happened is we've had issues of workforce development is sort of on this, you know, road, and then the work of the Corps and others around our environment and climate and all the other issues, parks, is sort of on a separate, and you all are one of the very few, if any, right? Few organizations that try to combine the two. I think we need to have a much more explicit workforce development element, much more on money, much more funding for that workforce development. And there's no doubt in my mind we can do it. It just hasn't been the focus of integrating the two. And as I mentioned, Senator Stern and Allen, we've been talking a lot about it. Everybody kind of gets known for a specialty that they have as far as legislation or work. And we need to make them a single issue. We are not going to be able to tackle all the issues related to climate change unless we have a much more aggressive and bigger workforce development program integrated into. We're just not. Well, and so we're going to keep on fighting climate change issues and not see it as also the future of this generation. It doesn't make sense. So I absolutely see it as possible. I think it's just something that people aren't used to thinking about it in those terms.
And then Lizbeth had a question that's somewhat similar. Would you like to ask that one, Erica, and then we'll wrap up?
Sure, it builds off of that. Actually, I'm going to focus on the second half of the question here. What advice do you have for folks from the Corps, from similar organizations, even in other states, to help them reach out to their legislators and champion these kind of causes?
Is that for me or Mary Ellen?
We'll start with you, Senator.
Well, that's a good question. In terms of taking it to other states, we certainly probably should connect with what we're doing. I know on other policy issues, as far as jobs and industries, I've done that with legislators in other states. So we should probably, you could help introduce and make that connection. And that would be a really good next step. I'm sure there are already people who believe in it, who want to do that, or maybe already doing it. We just haven't made the connection. And obviously the more states that are doing it, I think it's better for the national programs that Mary Ellen was talking about, or legislation on the federal level.
And if I could just briefly add to that, California is really a role model in terms of state support for service and conservation corps. Through the recycling program, corps are written into the RTP program, to transportation enhancements. We at the Corps Network actually take pieces of legislation and share them with other corps and other states and encourage them to follow your lead. So you really are an example of great state support of corps. And yeah, we encourage connections, and we encourage corps and communities to follow your lead.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their lunch hour with us. And I wanted to give a special shout out to our sponsors of our speaker series, as I mentioned before, Boeing, SoCal Gas, and Gallagher. We're going to be back here on Thursday and again the following Thursday. But in a couple days, we're going to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the Corps' commitment to climate resiliency and the simplest way to save our planet, which Michael mentioned, which is planting trees. We'll be joined by longtime friend of the Corps and environmental advocate Jake Levine, one of the LA Conservation Corps' most passionate environmentalists, Lawrence Melendez, and one of our Corps members, Oscar Murillo, who is studying environmental science right now in college. So please join us to continue our conversations on resilience, unleashing the power of youth. And have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, and don't forget to vote ASAP. Vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, Mary Ellen, Michael.